On the night of July 9th, 1962, people in Hawaii stepped out of bars, looked up at the sky, and saw the stars turn red. No warning, no sirens, just a sky on fire. Some thought it was the Soviet Union. Some thought it was the end of the world. They were half right. What they were actually witnessing was their own government detonating a 1.4 megaton thermonuclear bomb in outer space. And here's the terrifying part. Some people knew it was coming. They threw parties on rooftops. They called it the Rainbow Bomb. But what nobody knew, not the scientists, not the generals, not the president, was what was about to go horribly, irreversibly wrong. To understand Starfish Prime, you have to understand 1962. The world was on a razor's edge. The Soviet Union had just detonated Tsar Bomba, the most powerful nuclear weapon in human history. 58 megatons, 3,000 times the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. America was rattled. Washington needed an answer, and in the Pentagon, someone asked a question that nobody had properly answered yet. What happens if we detonate a nuclear bomb in space? The program was called Operation Dominic. The specific test fell under Operation Fishbowl, and the crown jewel was a test called Starfish Prime. The official goals sounded almost reasonable. Study the electromagnetic pulse, test whether nukes could intercept Soviet missiles, observe how an explosion behaves in a vacuum. But there was something else going on, something darker. Some military theorists believed the Van Allen radiation belts, the invisible shields protecting life on Earth, could be weaponized. Flood them with radiation, make space itself a nuclear minefield. They were playing with forces they barely understood, and they knew it, because the first attempt to launch Starfish had already gone wrong. The Thor rocket failed mid-flight. It had to be destroyed. Radioactive debris rained down on Johnston Atoll. The island was contaminated for months. They tried again anyway. July 9th, 1962, Johnston Atoll, 750 nautical miles southwest of Hawaii. The military had been waiting 4 days. Delays for weather, delays for logistics, last-minute checks. Tonight was the night. 27 smaller rockets, packed with scientific instruments, were already in the air to surround the blast zone. Military ships and planes were spread across the Pacific. Even the Royal New Zealand Air Force was in position, though most of them didn't fully know why. At 9 seconds past 10 p.m., a Thor missile carrying a W-49 thermonuclear warhead ignited and rose into the Pacific night. It climbed and climbed, past the clouds, past the atmosphere, past the Kármán line, the invisible boundary where Earth ends and space begins. At an altitude of 400 kilometers, roughly the same height the International Space Station orbits today, the warhead detonated. In space, there's no mushroom cloud, no shockwave, no sound. Just a brilliant ball of plasma expanding outward at thousands of miles per second, and a gamma ray burst ripping downward toward Earth at the speed of light. What happened next defied everything the scientists had predicted. In Honolulu, Hawaii, 900 miles from the blast, the sky suddenly exploded with light. A brilliant white flash, then a green fireball expanding rapidly outward, then concentric rings of light rippling across the horizon like a frozen halo. And then, something no one had ever seen before. A blood-red aurora, spreading from horizon to horizon, glowing for nearly 4 hours. People in New Zealand saw it. People in Samoa saw it. The aurora stretched across millions of square miles of Pacific sky. The crowd on the rooftops cheered, and then the lights went out. 300 streetlights across Oahu, gone, simultaneously. Burglar alarms, screaming, triggered by nothing. Telephone lines to Kauai, dead. Inter-island communications, severed. Radios, static. Televisions, static. The electromagnetic pulse from a bomb 400 kilometers above the Pacific had just attacked the electrical infrastructure of Hawaii, 1,445 kilometers away. And here's what makes that staggering. The scientists had modeled the EMP. They had run the numbers. Their own calculations said Hawaii was safe. They were wrong by an enormous margin. On the streets of Honolulu, people had no idea what was happening. Some ran, some prayed. Some assumed the Soviets had finally launched. In London, 300 people were protesting outside the US Embassy, chanting, "No more tests." They didn't yet know how right they were. The aurora faded. The streetlights flickered back on, and the world moved on. But 400 kilometers above their heads, the real damage was just beginning. Here's what the rooftop partygoers couldn't see. The nuclear explosion had done something no bomb had ever done before. It had injected billions of high-energy electrons directly into Earth's magnetic field. And instead of dissipating, they got trapped. The Van Allen belts, the invisible radiation shields that protect life on Earth, had just been artificially enhanced. A new radiation belt, man-made, was now circling the planet. And it was deadly to anything electronic in orbit. Within a month, at least 6 satellites failed. 6, out of only 24 that existed in orbit at the time. Starfish Prime had destroyed a third of humanity's entire satellite fleet. Among the casualties, Ariel 1, Britain's first satellite, and Telstar 1, AT&T's revolutionary communications satellite, which had launched the very day after Starfish Prime and was already relaying the world's first transatlantic telephone calls and television signals. Its transistors were fried by starfish radiation, then finished off months later by a Soviet high-altitude nuclear test. Which brings us to the darkest twist of all. The Soviet Union was also detonating nuclear weapons in space. Both sides contaminating the same orbital environment, the same space both of them needed for the satellite networks their own militaries depended on. They were destroying their own infrastructure to threaten each other. The artificial radiation belt lingered in space for years. A radioactive scar that no one could clean up, reverse, or fix. The US government had announced the test publicly. The yield, altitude, and exact time were shared with the world. They called it an event of worldwide scientific interest. What they did not share was how badly it went. The internal report, titled "A Quick Look at the Technical Results of Starfish Prime," was classified immediately. Key data from that night remained classified until 2006. For over 4 decades, the full story of what Starfish Prime had done to Earth's radiation environment, what it had done to space itself, was hidden. In 2022, scientists at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory used modern supercomputers to finally model the electromagnetic pulse from first principles, 60 years later, because the original data had been locked away. The magnetic tapes from that night in 1962 are now some of the only records ever taken of a real high-altitude nuclear detonation. There will never be others, because after what happened, the world finally said, never again. In 1962, Starfish Prime knocked out 300 streetlights in Hawaii and killed a third of 24 satellites. Now consider this. Today, there are over 8,000 active satellites in orbit. The entire global economy runs on them. GPS, banking, telecommunications, military command. Modern power grids are exponentially more interconnected than anything that existed in 1962. Starfish Prime was classified as a success. The data was collected. The weapons were studied.